Welcome to Team Perry's Step Out of Line podcast, featuring co-hosts Perry and Lori Finkelstein. Together, they explore, meet, and share inspirational stories with guests who have made a positive impact in today's world. This podcast resonates with our hope to make this world a better place one step at a time through love, acceptance, and uplifting conversations.
When you said about like the Holocaust, obviously it's so important to step out of line. I think especially what's happening now in the world, what's always happened in the world, like there's so many things that just require us to step out of line in order to literally save lives. And ever since I was a little girl, I was going to LGBTQI demonstrations, to anti-Nazi demonstrations, because I grew up with a dad who would take me there. Like I could literally barely walk. I would be on his shoulder. There were Nazis right in front of us. We were demonstrating against them. I partially went to a school with like over 90% Jewish people, I think. And I always grew up with like so many different people. And I also noticed obviously the struggles of marginalized people like myself or people who are more marginalized. And I just learned from a young age that it's not enough to just say, hey, this is not okay. We actually have to step out of line in order to help them. And so I was born in Africa. I grew up partially in Europe. And when I was a young teenager, I moved to the United States, to California on my own without my family. I've never been to the United States before. And first, I stayed with a 26-year-old who took me in, and I was able to go to high school, finish my high school, and then go to university. And I think that's one way where I stepped out of line. Shortly after I moved to the United States, I unfortunately lost my dad, the one who taught me the importance of stepping out of line. But I think that would be one of the ways. And then obviously just always trying to speak up when I see injustices. And yeah, I think that would be one of the ways.
What were the circumstances that made you want to come to the United States as a young teenager to make that move? Why did you do it, and how did you know you wanted to be here?
I always thought I did it because my dad traveled the world, and I've always wanted to see the world. And I was born in a place where if I would have stayed there, maybe my life would have been different. I would have loved to stay there. I think it would have been good for me, but I just also early on knew like the privileges. The privilege is to be in certain places, to have access to school, to food, to shelter, and all of that. So I think in order to honor like the privileges that I have and the blessings that I have that I literally didn't do anything for, I have to honor this life and by making the most out of it. So exploring it. But I also think being Black, and I'm already light skinned, but even with that privilege, I was bullied so much. I saw what my dark skinned mom went through in Germany, and I just sense that, belongingness. Like, I think it's so important to belong. I think everybody once said, especially children. I remember when I was really little and before moving to the States, not so long before, all the kids like in my grade, they would write a letter, like 2 pages, and they would have everybody sign the letter. And it was just like so many insults about me. And I just remember standing at this bus stop feeling so alone, feeling so much shame, and like just wanting to be in a place where I would see people that look like me or my mom. So I think those are some of the reasons that pushed me to go to the United States.
And you're a journalist. What did you do? Were you freelancing? How did you start with journalism? Did you go to school for that?
Yes, I did. I went to California State University for journalism, and I always knew that. So when I was a little girl, I would even take empty toilet paper rolls, and they would be my microphone, and I would like interview people. I always wanted to be a journalist because I wanted to, hand the microphone to those people who are so often not heard and wanted to save lives. I don't think I can be a doctor because I scream even when I see a cockroach. So I don't know if I can like open stomachs and stuff. So I was like, I can be a journalist. The Holocaust, I think even back then, was up to journalists to also raise awareness about these important issues. So yeah, I studied journalism. I worked freelance as a journalist before. And I also work full time at Google now. So I work in tech, which is obviously really exciting as well.
Why and how you ended up at Google?
As I was a freelancer before, it was like kind of tricky to get work as a journalist sometimes because it's very competitive, and also there's a lot of racism as well. So obviously women struggle more, women of color and so on. And then I was just like looking for a job, and I literally, it's so hard to get into Google. Like they say it's easier to get into Harvard than into Google. I think its acceptance rate for Harvard is like zero point 0.5 and Google's like zero point 0.3. So I applied and I was like, okay, I just applied for like 3 different jobs because that's the maximum you can apply to. And then, like a few weeks later, I got an email from, it says, hello from Georgina from Google. And I was like, yeah, sure, of course. Like, I didn't believe it. But yeah, so I went through the hiring process. We had like 4 really intense interviews. And then I was offered the role. And before I even started in the interview, obviously you have the option to also ask questions. And I was like, oh, what is your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion? So obviously Google says that they pride themselves on that. And then while I do a lot of sales and marketing, I also do a lot of DI. So that's also like my role. And how I do that, I'm part of the Black Board of Advisors, for example, which is a global initiative where we basically advise top leadership in Google how to attract and retain diverse talents. A lot of companies pride themselves on DI, but then you take a deep dive and you're like, is it really accessible? Like, you look at a building and I'm like, would a person in a wheelchair, for example, just be able to access this meeting room or even representation? How many people do you see that are actually not all the same? So these are a lot of things that I challenge. I would say that's a lot of my work, like not even doing the presentations, but actually going to these meetings and talking to top leadership as a part of any committee that I'm in. I'm also part of the DI champs and stuff like that. But even any meeting that I have, I'm like, how come everybody in this meeting looks the same? Sometimes I feel like there's not even a lot of diversity amongst like white people everywhere that I go. And I think Google obviously is doing a good job when it comes to DI, but there's always room for improvement, which makes sense because at the end of the day, it's just a reflection of the greater society.
Do you have any fears at all? Like anything? Are you fearful of anything?
I'm actually a really anxious person. Like I do deal with anxiety. Like I'm scared that something's gonna happen to people. I would say like I'm the kind of friend or like family member, like if I text any of you, did you make it home safely? I'm not doing it to be nice. It's because I've lost so many people in my life. And I told you my dad died
Right.
literally a few months after I moved to the States. I just always think something's gonna happen. So I think I would be fearful of that, because I'm
Right.
like, I don't think I can handle another horrible thing.
Right.
You're the same.
Yeah. I worry about every little thing sometimes. I make her crazy. And then sometimes when I'm calm, she's crazy. We switch off. You can't both be at the
Yeah.
same time because you can't both spiral. You have to take turns.
There's a rule that one person style at any time,
Right.
only one person,
But
and
both
then you
of us
have to
can't.
make your turn a
Right.
couple hours later.
I hope you have somebody who shares the anxiety with you like we do. Otherwise, it's just on you all the time. It's too much.
You're never both anxious at the same time. It's more like, okay, it's you, and then you switch it to
Right.
the other person.
What's the rule?
Right, we can't because one of us has to be sane and the other one has to be totally off the deep end. And we do that on a daily basis multiple times. And then if somebody else enters the room who's more anxious than the two of us, we tell them to leave because it's just overwhelming.
Too much.
Right, it's too
really
much.
too much. And that's why sometimes it's like, we can just say, oh no, but it's good. We're ambitious and stuff. But I think it's also good to calm the anxiety sometimes. But it does have good things as well. That's why sometimes I do things or even clean the whole house in like a short amount of time. People are like, how did you just cook dinner, clean the house?
Right. So speaking of cleaning houses, do you ever have a house to clean? You're traveling all over. Do you like your lifestyle?
So obviously I think it's a privilege to be able to travel and obviously like seeing, so much of the world. And since we just talked about anxiety, I think sometimes I am very like anxious or even depressed, but people don't see that, right? And then I feel like I don't have the right to feel that way because I'm standing in front of Times Square, in front of the Hollywood sign, in front of, I don't know, the Table Mountain or like the Opera House in Sydney. Like there's so many things that I'm privileged to like experience. Sometimes I feel like it doesn't hit me because I'm just like not in tune with myself. I'm just like I see it, but it doesn't really touch me like that. Even when I travel a lot also privately, and I also have a YouTube channel dedicated to showing another side of Africa. So I think that those are the most meaningful travels to me. So I basically travel just by myself with my camera to different African countries. and I produce short 8-minute videos on my YouTube channel and just say, hey, this is the Africa you don't see on TV, to kind of like, change those misconceptions. So it is really meaningful. And some journeys obviously are more meaningful than others. And also just having the privilege to sometimes work from different places, or travel with my sisters or travel on my own. Like, it is such a blessing, and it does make me feel like I'm connected to life more, even like you said, even when I'm anxious sometimes.
How many languages do you speak?
I only speak French and German, so 3.
And English.
English.
Actually, I'm fluent in sarcasm. I didn't mention that when you asked. Do you all speak any other languages, Hebrew or?
I could speak a little Hebrew. I could curse. I could curse in Arabic a little bit, which is helpful. Yes.
I know
A little Yiddish, which one word could give you an entire paragraph. So just say one word and get it done with easily. Once you hit your goal, you have a huge goal and you hit it and you're done. Do you bask in the happiness of it for days on end, or do you immediately say, okay, now what am I going to do? Perry's the type of person who's happy for like a minute and then says, now what am I going to do?
It's just like, let's keep going. This is what's possible. Especially like even talking like now about like COVID, how some people were more included. I was like, now that we're here, let's keep on including more people. Let's keep on going when you're already there. But I think it's also important to stop and smell the roses.
Did you, when you were a child, have any goals in your mind saying, this is a milestone I want to reach? Like you could storyboard and decide, what you want to do.
I did run a marathon, and I trained with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society of America. So we had to simultaneously raise money. That was definitely a goal. And when I was little, I think a lot of my goals were more about like, I don't want to say like world peace and stuff, but like not super, super tangible. Yeah, I wanted to be like a successful, famous journalist or somebody who can make a positive impact, but also just about, yeah, changing the world for the better, raising awareness, sensibilizing people for issues that they're not aware of. So it's like tangible, but not super tangible. But I just always saw like injustices. Like I told you, I saw, how people treated my mom, how the police would just stop her, how a man would harass her on the streets, nobody would do anything, like all these things, like people living with disabilities, like being harassed. Like, I saw crazy things like my whole life. And I was just like, I need to make this world a better place. Like, I'm not going to be quiet, and I need to use every resource that I have in order to do that. So I think that was always like my goal.
Did you ever play with dolls and toys and were like a regular kid, or no? Perry also feels like she did not have a regular childhood. She was always friends with adults. She didn't understand kids, that they had like no mind, or like she was very serious even as a young kid.
People would always tell me like, oh, you're so mature for your age. But I did love dolls. So I have 2 sisters, and I would say I'm definitely a girl's girl. We used to also role play a lot, and my sisters never wanted to really role play. And I was like, let's play. And I'm the teacher and you're the student. And my sister was like, even back then you were a control freak.
Bossy, right?
Bossy, right? Literally what she said. And I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. And she was like, you didn't even see a problem with that you always needed to be the teacher and boss us around.
Perry's probably the most serious minded at such a young age. Like she knew exactly where she wanted to be and what she was doing, and she didn't know how she was going to get there, but she knew she would do it. And she also understood that her time might not be as long as other people, because she knew she was very ill a lot of her childhood. And she knew she didn't want to waste time. And she wanted to get started and do what she had to do. And that's what she's done. She was never that little carefree kid. There was always something going on with her. When she was little, she had a physical therapist who taught her if she fell, how she should put her body in her hands to try to not break anything. She should kind of roll with it. And I'm thinking now, when she sees herself fall in another way in life, or doing a task and she's in front of people, or if she sees herself falling, she has trained herself how to fall in that way also, right, where she does not let it stop her. She pushes through it, and she just, instead of panicking, she immediately, within seconds, figures out a solution and just does it. Also, I don't know anybody else who could do it, because I was like, and she just picks herself up. She thinks on the fly and she just gets it done. I mean, afterwards, but after I told her, I went, just stand there and cry for like a minute, and like, oh my
what it happened.
It's also good to just like do it like just for a minute to just like have your moment and then keep going, you know?
Right. Perry said also, she goes, I can never go into therapy because once I started, it would just blow everything up and I wouldn't know how to put a keg in it.
Because that's the thing, you really have to be ready for that as well. I'm not in therapy right now, but when I was in therapy, I literally said that to my therapist. It was like, we have to go there, we have to go to those places. And I'm like, what's gonna happen if you unpack this and then I have to walk out of this place and I'm unstable? Like, who's gonna take care of me? Then I'm home
No.
alone with all these things that you just unpacked because it
Right.
has therapeutical value.
Right.
And
And then
and
you're left. Right.
right.
How do you unpack it and then stuff it back in the suitcase?
Oh my gosh, thank you. And also, like, society is not made for that. I mean, they don't take a lot of things into consideration, you know, like things happening in your life or even like mental health issues. Like you still have to perform and like be a
Right.
part of the society. So it's like you want us to like unpack all of these traumas, but then exactly like you said, who's gonna like help
Stuff it
help
back
us
in. Right.
put a suitcase back together?